Hello. Welcome once again. Hold on, let me just take a sip of tea. Wait a minute. I just got this, so the take actually doesn't officially start until I do this. For the new year, I'm pretty sure this video will be coming out solidly after the new year, but I wanted to kind of review my favorite books of 2024. But as I got deeper and deeper into the list, I realized that I actually loved most of the books that I read last year. And it was much more useful to me to do like a journey through my Goodreads to see all the books that I read chronologically through the year and kind of like just my surface overview thoughts of all of them. And so I guess let's head right to it. The first book I read this year was actually Divine Rivals. I think I was in a bit of a reading slump before because I really needed just like a very nice YA that wasn't too overcomplicated or hard to get into. And I mean, Divine Rivals satisfied beautifully. And I mean, it's a love story told by these two writers that, first of all, rivals to lovers. I'll always love it. It was the breath of fresh air I needed at the top of the year. And thank God, because it looks like it worked out because I actually had a really, really productive reading year. Like I've seen a lot of people be like, I've read 65 books this year. This is not that. I read about like 25, I think 23 actually. And that was with a hard push to read because I have life to live. But yeah, just good shit. Next book was Torch Against the Night. Okay, so forever ago, like literally back in high school, you could even see the book is ripped. I read this back in high school, the first book, and I liked it. It was a nice book. It didn't really stick with me. And so when the sequels came out, by then I had already moved on to other books. And so I just kind of left it by the wayside. The same person that recommended Divine Rivals to me also recommended the rest of this series to me, along with some other people. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it another try because I really take these people's opinions with great weight. And so I gave the series another try. I finished it this year. And holy moly guacamole, it is one of the best YA series. I mean, the first book is still about like a 3.5 to 4, depending how like you read it. But as far as a series, what it all builds into, so incredible. And like it's starting so like basic YA is kind of like the little fish hook to get you in. It's like if Throne of Glass went just like this instead of like that, you know? Anyway, I am getting ahead of myself. So the second book I read was not this, because I read that years ago. I'm not a rereader of books. So I was like, you know what? It's YA. They'll probably remind me of the big plot points. And I was right. And so this was the second book I read this year. So incredible. I give this series a big recommendation. It's not like the first book is painful to get through. It's just not like it doesn't hit you at the end until you get into the series and then you're like, oh, like I understand it now. But anyway, yes, second book of the year, Torch Against the Night, so good. Third book of the year. You can tell I got tired of the YA because I went hard in the other direction for this one. Well, I guess not hard in the other direction would maybe be nonfiction, but I read Ring Shao by P. Djeli Clark. This book is so cool. It is about a group of like black freedom fighters, I think in Louisiana, somewhere in the South, and they're like these supernatural freedom fighters, and they're fighting against just in basic life. If you take magic out of it, the things you do regularly are what builds your habits. Your habits are what build who you are every day. These are what we call rituals. And when you bring it into the supernatural sense, then you start to actually like anthropomorphize what these rituals will incur. It then shows how that evil is represented in our world. And specifically in this book, it's kind of talking about the way that evil ideas spread and change and infect people. But yeah, really, really great book. Such a great cast of characters. So fun. It's just a great time. And I really, really wish it wasn't so damn short. P. Djeli Clark needs to start writing full-length books. And I know I've read Master of the Jinn last year. Great, but still the only first book. I digress. Let's move on. The streak continued. I read Reaper of the Gates after Ring Shout. This isn't really a review, but again, another incredible book. Reaper of the Gates maybe is like, if I had to order the series just real quick, since it's the books, I would maybe go like, God, it's so hard to do now. I shouldn't have put myself on the spot like this. Don't hold me to this. I'm gonna go 2, 3, 4, 1. That's the call. Anyway, so that's Reaper of the Gates, I guess. That'll just be my review for that. The next book. Oh my God, this book broke me, and I'd been meaning to read it for a while. Where is it? Where are you? Where art thou? Here it is. Oh my God, man. If you know me, you know that Octavia Butler is one of the saints that I worship. Parable of the Sower is one of the books that, like, when people say like this book changed the way I think about life, Parable of the Sower is that. And Parable of the Talents is such a gut punch of a book, man. Like it hurts, but it hurts in the way that medicine hurts. And it hurts to even say that because what happens in the book is so devastating, but it was so good. It's so well written, and I think what happens is necessary, especially in the message of the book. I gave it 5 stars. The series Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, I don't know what it's called, the Parable series or something. I should know this. But if you've never read it, if you've never read Octavia Butler, I mean, she does a lot of big sci-fi things, but like if you're talking about like ethos, her approach, her mind, Parable of the Sower, man. But anyway, next book. But Parable of the Sower, Jesus, just so good, so good. Next. All right, this one is a bit of a cheat because this is How You Lose a Time War. I started like in November of 2023. I just finished it this year, and it's, as you can see, quite a short book. So why did it take me so long? Because it's actually more of a book of poetry, or it was for me, than it was a book of like chronological story or a narrative, even though one exists. But this is just like a book of love letters that are just so beautiful, man. I recommend it to anyone because I love poetic language, but I'm not really someone that likes to read poetry. If you love poetic prose and love, then this is just so good, man. So lovely. All right, I actually don't physically have the next book, so I'm gonna do this and maybe edit it in, but it's called The King of Dead Things, and I got an ARC for it, which is how I came across it. I didn't actually know about it, and it was a pretty interesting book. I think I give it like 4 stars. It's set in somewhere in Europe, maybe England. It was a really engaging tale. I really hope that it's not a standalone because it makes the world feel like a little cut off too soon. It feels like you only just got to start to experiment and kind of learn about what type of magic system this is. But I thought that the tale was interesting. I thought that the characters were all... The characters are maybe the best part of the book. And yeah, I just had a great time. It's a YA book. It was just a good time. Things. Ooh! And then I read a middle grade book, and I actually love this book. I kind of wish that I was taking like notes and stuff in books back when I read this. Holy shit. Middle grade writing, the words are so big, but it is just such a great book. I think it has such a positive look at masculinity for young black men, for boys in general, for how to deal with emotions. The main character is dealing with some deep grief, and that even ties into the message of the whole book as it deals with the transatlantic slave trade, because it deals with the myths of African American culture, which directly reflect the experiences, and it's just the way it is written is very true to folklore, which is always going to win points with me. And I just thought it was really, really well written, and it was a very fun adventure. I genuinely, reading this middle grade book, I was giggling, just having a great time. So, love this book. And I own the other two. I'm eventually read them. They're middle grade books, so eventually I'm gonna just lock in and knock them out. But like, I just have so many books to get to, guys. All right. If you guys have followed the videos, you probably have seen this before. This is the next one that I read. Masquerade. I was just reflecting 2 days ago about how good this book was this year, about how I kind of wanted to read it again just to relive some of the moments. I also wish I was taking notes back when I read this book. What occurs in this book, the journey for the main character, like, it's just so good, man. It's so good. I put this shit on everything. It's like a more realistic A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I would have liked Farrah much better if she ended up like Adodo did. But anyway, great book. So good. I had a banger of a year as far as books are concerned. After that, we have Sky Beyond the Storm. I think I gave this the third after the third, like I gave the ranking 2 3. Wait, no, I didn't. If you watch this video, you remember the ranking I gave it. 2 3 4 1. That's the call. Anyway, they're all great books. And so this was the last book of the series. I think it wrapped it up very well. I'm very I plan on getting Air and reading it pretty soon. It's just, again, so many books to get to, but really great book, really great into the series, and so deep for YA. With all the books that I've talked about, like, oh, I haven't had time to get to that yet, I was knocking series out of this park this year. This was the conclusion to the Black Sun, Rebecca Roanhorse, Beyond Earth and Sky, maybe the series is called, but it's so good. Oh my God, I love this book. I love the cover of it, and it's one of those books where, like, I was kind of nervous. The first book I really, really loved. The second book is good, but if you wanted the same vibe as the first book, it's way slower. It builds a lot of the stuff for this third book. And there's oh my God, I can't even speak. The third book of this is so incredible. If you read this, they did my boy Okoa so dirty. That's if I meet Rebecca, I have to say, why you do my homie like that? Why you do my homie like that? And I wasn't even like that attached to him, but he did so much. Just you know what? Forget it. But such a great series. I have all three, and I'm so happy that I have all three. And yeah, just a really great end to a series. Great year, man. Oh shit, wrong one. Next, Black Shield Maiden. This is one of the more interesting ones that I've read this year. Contextually, this is the first book I think that I did for the book club that I ended up taking notes and stuff, even though you can see the notes are horrible because I just started for real. But you know, I don't really think that Willow Smith sat down and wrote this book the way I think she sat down and wrote her albums, which I do like her albums. I think Jess Hendel, you know, her co-writer, did a lot of the writing. I think she probably concepted a lot of it. But with that being said, it is a cool story. Like, if you just want a good historical fiction book that is kind of like magical realism with a strong main character with just a interesting dynamic, it's sure. I think it drags a bit in the middle. And like with all the bangers of books that I've read this year, like this is a 3, and that's not bad. But I've read like 4s and 5s all year. But yeah, it was a cool book, and I love you, Willow. All right, this one is it's a little bit less celebratory, even though it is. It's just a little too fast is the issue. I love this series, and I like the first book. I think the second book, like, I wanted to actually murder Inan with my own hands, and then him being next to me for this book, I was just like, bro, get homie out of here, pack him up. But what I will say is it's YA. So I'm not going to judge it on the same scale that I would judge this book on. But with that said, I think that this book could have been really, really great if it was just split into 2 books and slowed down. Because there's so much that happens in this book. And if you've watched my review for it, you probably know this already. But it's just like this, man. But I mean, if you aren't really someone that pauses to think about like story structure and stuff, and I don't mean this as a diss, I just mean like sometimes people are just like, hey, it's magic, who gives a fuck? And if you're that type of person, hey, it's a lovely book and it's a fun series, so I'd recommend all 3. But if you've paid attention to the stuff I put up, you know I'm a little more into the particulars, even though I'm not super into it. Like, I'm a little too into it to just yada yada over the stuff that happens in this book. But it was a fun time. It's funny to look at this in hindsight because it's almost like me complaining about Children of Anguish and Anarchy made the universe put City We Became in my path right after that, because the City We Became is maybe as far away on the spectrum of fantasy as you can get from Children of Anarchy and Anguish. Anguish and Anarchy? Anyway, because it's so intricate, it communes with the work of H.P. Lovecraft, and it seeks to interrogate his ideas. I mean, and I think it succeeds, but like the way it does it is it takes a lot of thought and a lot of intricacy, and it shows a lot of love for New York. I've never been, and this book kind of made me be like, hey, maybe I would want to go. I know that sounds crazy to a lot of people, but I'm not like really one for crowded places and stuff, or like bustle like that, you know? But I just want to say that this was a really good book. It is a bit, the ending. Why end it like that? Like, I think the ending is a bit rushed, but that would honestly be like the only thing that I would really take away from the book. And I will read the next sequel, but again, when life finds me, when we find each other, I will read it. I think it's called The World We Make, which I love that title. Anyway, next book. Yes. Oh, I see. I knew I was forgetting to pull some. I don't think I have the next book in the pile here. Bro, I be moving. Yep, there it is. Hold up, I'll be right back. Clapper. The next book I read was The Familiar. When I read this book, I really wanted a romance, but I wanted a romance with a little more oomph beneath it, beyond just, hey, I'm in love with this person. And The Familiar, it served in droves. Again, this was a weird moment because right after the City We Became, I read this, and both of these have weirdly rushed endings. But the rest of the books are just so gorgeous. This is a historical fiction, and it's a supernatural romance, and it's gorgeous, and it's beautiful, and it feels like love. And so, next book. Next book was a all around just satisfier. He would never be satisfied, but where The Familiar and City We Became had me feeling like, bro, what is up with all these books that don't be ending well? This book was so good from top to bottom. I just like, this is the first book that I've read by Shannon. I had heard of her work, obviously City of Brass, very big name in fantasy, but I just never really cared to hear her write about it. And this book came across my attention because, I mean, look at the cover. It's just fantasy bait if you like fantasy. But a couple of my coworkers said that we would read it, and we all read it together, friends as well. But we all read this book, and it was definitely, out of all the books that I have spoken about and that I will continue to speak about, it was the most fun book that I've read this year, hands down. Most fun, and it still has like message, it still has oomph behind it. It's a love letter to myth making, to storytelling, to legend, how they're built, how they're told. It's just really good. City We Became gave me like a little too much thinking, and then Familiar just didn't land its point in the end for me. Like, it didn't stick the landing, and then this thing did both. It was so fun throughout the whole thing, and then it stuck the landing, and so I'm just excited to see what's next. Oh my god. See, my year really ramped up over time. Like, the beginning of the year, I read good books and I read impactful books, but as far as like, I really hit a stride at the end as far as like book enjoyment. But where's this? Oh, it's on the freaking bottom. Hold up. Next book, Baron the Nightingale. I've purchased this book about 3 years ago, and it's been on my shelf, and I've been intending to read it for all 3 years. Look how skinny it is. This is just a testament to all you out there when you have that book on your shelf and people are like, you bought that, but you keep buying books, you're never going to read them. And you just have to let them know, I'm going to read that in 3 years, and it's going to be the best experience of my life. Because bang, this book is such a banger. I bought the other two of the series, and I don't know when I'm going to read them, but like I said, I'm going to get to them when I get to them. Such a gorgeous fairy tale. This is literally what I have in my brain when I think fairy tale, when I'm talking about prose, when I'm talking about lessons woven throughout the story about community, you know, just classic folklore shit. And it's very loosely a romance, and there's so little romance in it, but the whole thing feels like falling in love. And so it's just so good, and I couldn't recommend it more. I actually don't have the next one with me right now either, so let me go find this next one. All right, I remember why I don't have it, which is that I gave it to my sister just in case she wanted to read it, because she's trying to get back in reading. I was giving it as like a gateway drug, because the book, I guess I'm gonna do it like the other one. This is Far Sector. It is a Green Lantern comic written by N.K. Jemisin, the City We Became author. It's so freaking good. I already have like a video on it on a channel somewhere, I don't know. Anyway, it's exactly like the type of sci-fi that I like. I mean, not surprising considering she also wrote City We Became, but like just weaving real life throughout the sci-fi, because I think both fantasy and sci-fi should be a way to either look at humanity different, or to see who we could become, or, you know, what we shouldn't become. And I think this graphic novel does all three. So I think if you wanted to get this for someone that doesn't really like reading, but maybe wants to kind of get into it, because it has really big ideas and concepts, even just in the interpersonal, really good. Recommend it. Next book. The next book is The Only Good Indians. This book was such an interesting experience, because I read this as a part of my book club, and it was maybe the first book that I read in like a week and a half of the book club, because usually it takes me like the full month-ish, because I'd be taking notes and stuff. But this one, I sped through it. A lot of it is how the book is written. It was the first horror book of the book club, and it was good. I just think it should have been a literary fiction book. I literally just read a book called The Bog Wife, and it maybe has more instances of pure visual magical realism than this does, which isn't negative, but like the way the second half of the book is written, it's very much a focus on the humans rather than, you know what, forget it, I'm digressing. I think it's a really good horror book, and I think it does that weaving of the supernatural with reality in order to metaphorically speak about the issues of society, specifically as it pertains to this one of Native American society, and then America as a whole as a result of that. But the second half just the pacing of the second half I couldn't really do, because it's like you think something's about to happen and then nothing happens, and then you think something's about to happen and then nothing happens, and then you think something's about to happen and nothing happens, and it's just like, geez, bro. And then everything that happens is off screen, you know. I'm sorry. My main issue with this book is my own expectations of what I wanted to see, you know. So I don't necessarily put that on this book. I do kind of put it on its categorization as horror as opposed to literary fiction. But I do understand, in considering how horrific a lot of the imagery can be. So, you know what? It is what it is. I'm going to stand on it. It was all right. Oh my God. If you follow, then you already know how I feel about this book. Someone you can build your nest in. I mean, I just saw this cover, and this is automatically just gonna get me to look at your cover. And the story it tells about love is so gorgeous, and it does it by interrogating our conception of monsters. And you know, really at the heart of most of these books that you have seen me go through, they're all a meditation on the way that humans create monsters and the purpose of that. We can get into that again later, because that's not the purpose of this video. But I will say that it's a very gorgeous love story. If you love love, then I would definitely recommend. If you like spiciness, I would say don't read this at all. If you hate gore, don't read this. But it's gory and it's gorgeous, and I think that those two mix, the way that he is able to communicate it and like express the way that these two learn to love each other right and put that work in. I think it's so gorgeous, and I think it's so necessary for this genre. And so this was one of my favorite books this year, hands down. So beautiful. I would read it again. Every now and then, I will pull up my bootstraps and I will lock in and read a nonfiction book. And for me this year, that was The Will to Change by Bell Hooks. This book is one of those. This book is like the next Parable of the Sower for me. It was one of those things where, like, as I've read through a lot of these books, like, if you see a lot of the books that I am reading, there is a lot of feminine rage that you will encounter. And there's just a lot of questions around, like, the path around that. All of these books deal very intricately with patriarchy, even if they don't talk directly about it. And so this whole year, I've kind of just had this feeling in the back of my mind of this, like, question that had not quite formed of what is this beast that shows up between all the pages, and why does it show up in all these different ways, and why is it so loud right now, with it also feeling like it's kind of just being swept aside, you know? And so The Will to Change for me was like the answer to that. And it's so crazy because, I mean, Bell Hooks is no longer with us, rest her soul. And this is actually my first Bell Hooks book. And it's also kind of what I've been looking for for years because there's like a very big male empowerment industry right now that I think is built on men stepping on other men. And I wanted to find out if there existed a book that talked about masculinity from a perspective that wasn't so punishing and judgmental, and insecure, like a lot of those books are, and so entrenched in power dynamics, like I think a lot of masculinity books deal with how you interact with other people rather than like your own self-conception and who you are and what being a man means to you. And so this book did such a good job of like unpeeling all the layers of patriarchy so you can just see it spread out and see why the world interacts with itself the way it does, And so I know that's very vague. Read the book. It's not that long. It's like 300 pages. If I could do it, you can do it. So good. One of my favorite books ever. And then immediately I head into a book that deals with all of that. This is technically a horror book. It's YA called I Feed Her to the Beast and the Beast is Me. I think this book does a really good job of showing the monster of patriarchy. And what I mean by that is just like a very, very boiled down concept of this book is the fact that patriarchy is a system that is built to benefit man. But man, as it's defined in the context of patriarchy, isn't someone with a penis. It is a very specific conception of a man that is built in violence and hyper masculinity and all these different qualities and domination, all these things, right? And so that makes it so people strive for this idea of man, regardless of your sex or gender. You strive for that ideal of man because the closer you can get to that ideal of man, which is built around other identities as well, but the closer you get to that ideal of man is the closer you get to the top of society. And so this book deals with the way that like the cannibalistic nature of high society ballet. It's entrenched in race politics, in classism, in just so much of the way that the system nurtures the monsters in people in order to benefit it and villainizes the ones that it kicks out, And I think it's a fun novel, I'm kind of getting deep with this YA book, but it's a fun novel. It's nice being in the mind of an anti-hero, sometimes. This book is mainly a revenge story, and sometimes it just feels good to see someone get revenge, maybe take it a little too far, but just be like, hey, like, shouldn't have messed with him. Next book. Oh my god, it's the last book. We're nearly at the end. So this is literally a book that I finished last night, and it is increíble. If I'm not counting The Only Good Indians, which I'm not, this is the only literary fiction book that I've read, unless you correct me because you watched the video. I don't remember, but this is the only literary fiction book I read. It's about a family in Appalachia. They drown their patriarch in a cranberry bog in order for the bog to create a wife for the new patriarch to marry every generation. But there is a lot of fucked up shit. I mean, that's already fucked up, but there's a lot of fucked up shit wrapped in that fucked up shit. And it's a brilliant like family novel about confronting the past, about having a relationship with your surroundings, of giving and not just taking, of not getting trapped in the mistakes of your ancestors, and knowing when it's time to change. And it's just a lot. It's a lot. And it's all told in this really charged, emotional story between these family members. And it's really good. And yeah, so those are all the books that I've read this year for the most part. I'm sure there are a couple outliers here or there, but those are all the books that I read this year that I care to talk about at least. And I had a brilliant year this year reading. I don't know. I just finished Bog Wife, and I don't know how I feel right now. I think I might be going into a deep nonfiction binge after this, which is insane. And don't hold me to it because I could be lying to you. But yeah, I will see you guys in the new year. Maybe seeing you in the new year right now, or something's gonna happen. See you next time.